She didn't raise a son to share him, she raised him to belong to her. From the very beginning, everyone said she was lucky. Lucky to have found a man who was calm, respectful, and well-mannered. Lucky to have married into a family that appeared close, prayerful, and disciplined. On their wedding day, smiles filled the air, blessings followed them like rain, and promises were spoken with trembling voices and hopeful hearts. She entered marriage with soft dreams and strong faith. She believed love would grow with time, that patience would water it, and that understanding would protect it from storms. She imagined a home where laughter rested on the walls, where disagreements ended in conversation, and where her husband's arms would always be her safest place. In public, he treated her well. He opened doors, spoke gently, and held her hand when people were watching. Friends admired how peaceful they looked together. Relatives whispered that she had married a good man. Even strangers could see the respect in the way he addressed her. From the outside, everything looked right. But what no one noticed was how often his phone rang, and who it was always for. Every decision, no matter how small, seemed to require approval. What they ate. Where they went. How late they stayed out. When she spoke, he listened, but when his mother spoke, he obeyed. He never raised his voice. He never argued. He simply adjusted, again and again, without realizing what it was costing his marriage. She noticed the patterns early, but she chose love over fear. She told herself it was normal. After all, wasn't it good for a man to respect his mother? Wasn't family unity a blessing? She swallowed her discomfort and smiled, even when plans changed suddenly because Mama said so. At family gatherings, she felt it most. The way his mother watched her, quietly, carefully, like someone measuring space that did not belong to them. The way his hand slipped from hers the moment his mother entered the room. The way his laughter softened, his posture changed, his attention shifted. Still, she tried. She cooked with care, spoke with respect, and showed humility. She believed that kindness would win hearts and that time would settle everything. If I love him enough, this will get better, she told herself. But love should not feel like competition. At night, when the house was quiet and the lights were low, she lay beside a man who loved her, but belonged elsewhere. She could feel it in the pauses, in the unfinished sentences, in the way he avoided difficult conversations. Whenever she gently raised a concern, he brushed it aside with a calm smile and familiar words, "She means well." Who was she to question a mother's love? So she kept quiet. She kept hoping. She kept believing that marriage would eventually create its own boundaries. What she didn't know was that boundaries are not formed by time, but by courage. Outside, people admired them. Inside, something invisible had already taken a seat in their marriage, steady and uninvited. She didn't raise a son to share him, she raised him to belong to her. From the very first visit, it became clear that his mother was not just present in his life, she was planted there, deeply rooted. She called every morning, sometimes twice, asking if he had eaten, what he planned to wear, where he was going, and when he would return. Her voice carried warmth, but also weight, the kind that bends decisions without raising alarm. To outsiders, it sounded like love. A caring mother. A woman who sacrificed everything for her only son. She spoke softly, prayed loudly, and wrapped every instruction in concern. "I just want what's best for you," she would say, her eyes fixed on him, never once meeting his wife's gaze. At first, the wife tried to understand. She reminded herself that mothers worry. She smiled when plans changed at the last minute because Mama is not comfortable with that. She nodded when meals were criticized and corrected. She listened when advice turned into instruction and instruction slowly became command. But soon, her voice began to fade in her own home. Every suggestion she made was compared to what his mother preferred. Every choice she offered was measured against what his mother would approve. When disagreements arose, he didn't defend or explain, he postponed. "Let's ask Mama," he would say, as though marriage required supervision. The mother's opinions arrived uninvited and stayed too long. She commented on how the wife cooked, how she dressed, how she spoke. She praised obedience and frowned at independence. When the wife tried to set gentle boundaries, they were laughed off as disrespect. Still, she tried harder. She adjusted her tone, softened her words, reduced herself piece by piece, hoping peace would grow in the empty spaces she created. "If I stay calm, he will see me," she thought. But what happens when concern becomes control? The mother visited often, and when she did, the house shifted. The wife became a guest in her own space. Decisions were made over her head, instructions delivered in her presence but never addressed to her. And the husband, kind, quiet, well-meaning, remained comfortably silent. He did not notice how his wife's laughter thinned. He did not hear the questions she swallowed. He did not see that every time he chose comfort over courage, he taught his mother that she could go further. The mother believed she was protecting her son. In truth, she was keeping him small. And the wife, standing between them, felt herself shrinking to survive. Love was no longer enough to be heard. The loudest pain in marriage is not shouting, it is silence. At first, she thought silence meant peace. No raised voices. No harsh words. No public arguments. Whenever tension appeared, her husband chose quiet, calm, and withdrawal. He believed avoiding conflict was maturity. He believed staying neutral would keep everyone happy. But neutrality has a cost. Whenever his mother corrected her in that soft, cutting tone, he said nothing. Whenever boundaries were crossed, he looked away. When his wife tried to explain how it made her feel, he listened, but only with his ears, not his actions. "Let's not make it a big issue," he would say, hoping time would erase discomfort. She waited for him to speak up. She waited for a simple sentence, "That's my wife. Please respect her." But the sentence never came. Slowly, the house filled with unspoken words. Meals were eaten quietly. Conversations became careful. Laughter felt forced. She found herself rehearsing her thoughts in her head, only to swallow them before they reached her lips. Each time she stayed silent, a small part of her withdrew. "Why am I the only one fighting for this marriage?" she wondered. His silence taught his mother that she could say more, do more, and demand more. It also taught his wife that her pain was not urgent enough to be addressed. Love began to feel lonely. Support felt conditional. Protection felt optional. One evening, after another uncomfortable visit, she finally asked him, her voice low and tired, "Why don't you ever defend me?" He sighed, not in anger, but in exhaustion. "I don't want problems," he replied. "She's my mother." But what about me? She wasn't asking him to choose sides. She was asking him to choose responsibility. Marriage, she believed, meant standing together, especially when it was uncomfortable. Yet every time he remained silent, he unknowingly chose comfort over commitment. The cracks did not come from shouting or violence. They came from absence. From moments when she needed reassurance and received avoidance. From days when she felt alone, even while sitting beside her husband. Silence became his shield. But it became her wound. She began to notice the change in herself. She spoke less. She smiled less. She stopped sharing her thoughts, then her fears, then her dreams. When love is not protected, it slowly suffocates. And still, he believed silence was saving the marriage. How long can love survive without a voice? She stayed quiet to keep peace, but peace never came. She told herself that respect was strength, that patience was wisdom, that endurance was love. So she kept trying. When her mother-in-law corrected her tone in front of others, she smiled. When her cooking was criticized, she apologized and adjusted. When decisions were made without her, she reminded herself that harmony mattered more than pride. She chose calm even when her chest burned with hurt. She believed that if she stayed gentle, things would soften. But something else was happening. Each time she remained silent, the mother-in-law stepped closer. Each time she bowed her head, the voice above her grew louder. Instructions replaced suggestions. Commands replaced advice. And what began as concern slowly turned into control. The mother-in-law now spoke freely in the house, telling her when to wake, what to cook, how to behave. She questioned her spending, monitored her movements, and commented on her body, her manners, her worth. All of it delivered with a smile that said, "I know better." And the wife endured. She endured because she loved her husband. She endured because she feared being labeled disrespectful. She endured because she hoped one day her goodness would be enough. "If I just try harder, this will stop," she told herself. But endurance was misunderstood. To the mother-in-law, patience looked like permission. Silence looked like agreement. Respect looked like submission. She grew bolder, more confident, more demanding, because no one stopped her. Not even her son. When the wife finally gathered courage to speak, softly, carefully, she was accused of overreacting. "You are too sensitive," they said. "She is only trying to help." Help that hurt. Advice that bruised. Love that suffocated. At night, she lay awake, replaying moments she wished she had handled differently. Words she wished she had spoken. Boundaries she wished she had drawn. She wondered how being respectful had turned into being invisible. Is it wrong to expect dignity in your own home? Her husband still believed silence would fix everything. He didn't see that his wife was slowly learning to disappear. He didn't realize that every time he asked her to manage, he was teaching her that her pain was negotiable. The mother-in-law, emboldened by freedom, pushed further. And the wife, exhausted by endurance, felt herself nearing a breaking point. Because respect without boundaries is not peace, it is quiet suffering. They blamed her for everything, except the truth. It started with whispers. Questions asked with fake concern. Looks that lingered just long enough to wound. "Why has there been no child yet? What are you doing about it? Have you seen a doctor?" At first, she answered politely. She explained with calm words and forced smiles. She reminded herself that such questions were common, that people did not always mean harm. But soon, the questions turned into conclusions, and the conclusions turned into accusations. The blame settled on her shoulders like a heavy load she did not deserve. Her mother-in-law spoke openly now, no longer pretending. She blamed her for delays, for disappointments, for prayers that had not yet been answered. She spoke of fertility as if it were a measure of value. She compared her to other women, quietly at first, then boldly, as if shame were a tool meant to correct her. The wife tried to speak the truth. She spoke of medical visits, of patience, of faith. But her words were ignored. Truth was inconvenient. Blame was easier. Her husband watched it all unfold. Sometimes he told her to ignore it. Sometimes he told her to pray harder. Sometimes he said nothing at all. He never once said, "Stop blaming my wife." He never once asked for fairness. His silence gave permission for cruelty to continue. "Why am I being punished for something I didn't cause?" she asked herself. The shame crept into her thoughts. It followed her into the kitchen, into the bedroom, into her prayers. She began to doubt her body. She began to doubt her faith. She began to doubt her worth. Each insult chipped away at her confidence. Each accusation planted a seed of guilt. She started apologizing for things she had not done. She started shrinking herself to avoid attention. She started believing that maybe, somehow, this was her fault. But how do you carry a burden that was never yours? Her breaking point did not come loudly. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, on a night when she stared at her reflection and no longer recognized the woman looking back. A woman who once dreamed of love now only prayed for peace. She realized then that she was drowning under expectations, blame, and shame while standing in a marriage that refused to protect her. And in that painful moment, something inside her cracked. Because a woman can endure many things, but not the loss of her dignity. A man who refuses to choose has already chosen. The moment finally came when silence could no longer hide the truth. His wife stood before him, tired eyes searching his face, her voice steady but wounded. She did not shout. She did not insult his mother. She simply asked for what every wife deserves: protection, clarity, and boundaries. She asked him to speak. To stand up. To choose his marriage. He listened. He nodded. He sighed. And then, he did nothing. He explained that confronting his mother would hurt her feelings. He reminded his wife of his mother's sacrifices. He asked for more patience, more understanding, more time. Time, he believed, would soften hearts and solve what courage refused to face. Why is my pain always negotiable? She thought. His loyalty was loud, but it was not for his marriage. Every time his mother crossed a line, he asked his wife to endure. Every time his wife reached a breaking point, he asked her to forgive. He believed neutrality made him a good son, unaware that it was turning him into a distant husband. Love between them began to feel strained. Conversations became brief. Touch felt cautious. Laughter disappeared. Emotional intimacy, the glue that held them together, slowly faded under the weight of unresolved conflict. She started keeping things to herself. There was no point in explaining anymore. No point in hoping. The man she married was physically present, but emotionally unavailable, trapped between obedience and fear. How can a marriage survive when one partner refuses to stand? He told himself he was keeping peace. In reality, he was choosing comfort over commitment. By refusing to draw boundaries, he allowed his mother to remain at the center of his home and pushed his wife to the edges. The house grew cold, not from lack of love, but from lack of safety. Love needs protection to breathe. And without it, even the strongest bond begins to suffocate. She looked at him one evening and realized something painful. He loved her, but not enough to risk displeasing his mother. Not enough to defend her dignity. Not enough to choose adulthood over obedience. That realization hurt more than all the insults combined. Because a woman can forgive many things, but not being abandoned while standing beside her husband. She didn't leave because she stopped loving, she left to survive. The decision did not come suddenly. It came after many sleepless nights, quiet tears, and prayers whispered into pillows. It came after realizing that love alone could not fix what silence had broken. It came when her heart grew too tired to keep hoping. That morning, the house felt different. Not heavy, just clear. She moved slowly, folding clothes, touching familiar corners, breathing deeply as if to store courage in her lungs. Every memory tugged at her chest, but for the first time, fear did not win. She thought of all the times she had begged to be heard. All the times she had chosen patience over dignity. All the times she had shrunk herself to keep others comfortable. I cannot keep disappearing to keep this marriage alive, she told herself. When he came home, she sat across from him with calm eyes and a steady voice. She did not accuse. She did not shout. She simply told him the truth, that she was empty, that she was tired, that she no longer felt safe in a place that called itself home. He tried to reassure her. He promised change. He asked for time. But she had given time. Years of it. What more could she sacrifice without losing herself completely? She packed a small bag, not because she had no pain, but because she had clarity. Each item she folded felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. She left behind tears, fear, and the constant need to prove her worth. As she stood at the door, she paused. Love still lived in her heart. But love, she had learned, should not cost peace. She walked out, not with anger, but with resolve. Outside, the air felt lighter. Her steps were unsure, but her spirit felt free. For the first time in a long while, she was not explaining herself, not apologizing, not waiting for permission. She was choosing herself. Is choosing peace really selfish? She did not know what the future held. But she knew what the past had taken. And she knew that staying would mean losing the woman she was meant to be. So she left, not because she stopped loving him, but because she finally started loving herself enough to walk away. He protected his mother's feelings and lost his future. The house felt empty in a way it never had before. Not just quiet, but hollow. The silence he left behind was different from the silence he used to hide behind. This one echoed. It followed him from room to room, reminding him of what was gone. Her absence revealed everything he had refused to see. He noticed the small things first. The untouched cup she always used. The corner where she used to sit and pray. The warmth that once filled the space was gone, replaced by a cold odor that felt unfamiliar and heavy. How did I let this happen? He wondered. His mother moved freely now, confident and satisfied. She gave instructions without resistance. She arranged the house as she pleased. She spoke as though victory had finally come. But the joy she expected never arrived. Instead, the house felt like a place without rest. For the first time, he began to understand what his wife had endured. The constant interference. The pressure. The lack of boundaries. Without his wife absorbing the tension, he became the next target of control. He tried to speak up once. His mother dismissed him. He tried again. She reminded him of sacrifice. Each conversation ended the same way, with guilt and obedience. And regret. He replayed moments he once ignored. The nights she cried quietly. The times she asked him to speak. The warnings he dismissed as exaggeration. He realized that by trying to please everyone, he had failed the one person who needed him most. How do you fix what you refuse to protect? He thought of calling her. Apologizing. Explaining. But words felt weak now. Too late. She had already chosen peace, and peace does not wait for regret to mature. His mother's control had cost him more than he imagined. It did not bring closeness. It did not bring fulfillment. It brought isolation, tension, and loss. He sat alone one evening, staring at the door she once walked through. For the first time, he understood that silence is not kindness, and avoidance is not love. Regret settled in his chest like a permanent weight. Some doors must close for your soul to breathe again. She opened her eyes to a new morning, quiet, calm, and entirely hers. The weight that had pressed on her chest for years was gone, replaced by a fragile but growing sense of freedom. Every deep breath reminded her that she had survived, and that survival was not weakness, but courage. She began rebuilding, slowly and deliberately. Small steps first, a walk in the park, a coffee at her favorite cafe, a phone call to a friend she hadn't spoken to in months. Then bigger ones, a new job, a personal project she had long postponed, a space in her home filled only with what brought her joy. Each action felt like reclaiming a piece of herself that had been buried under years of compromise. Am I allowed to be this happy? She thought. At first, guilt tried to shadow her. Memories of the marriage whispered that leaving was wrong, that loyalty was sacred, that love should endure. But she realized that love without respect, without safety, without reciprocity, was not love, it was survival in disguise. And she had already survived. Friends and family watched her transformation with quiet admiration. They saw her laughter return. They noticed the confidence in her stride. They heard the warmth in her voice, the glow of someone finally living for herself. And she, for the first time, stopped apologizing for her choices. She spent evenings reflecting, journaling her thoughts, and planning her future. Each day, she learned more about her strength, her worth, and her dreams. She realized that peace is not found in another person's acceptance, it is created by valuing yourself enough to walk away from what diminishes you. Some nights, she thought of him, the husband who never chose. She did not hate him, but she understood clearly that she could never rely on someone who could not stand beside her when it mattered most. Her peace, she knew, could never come from waiting for him to change. How long must one wait for someone who refuses to act? She smiled at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was unbroken, resilient, and whole. She no longer measured her worth by the opinions or control of others. She measured it by the strength it took to leave, the courage to rebuild, and the love she now gave herself first. Some doors close not to punish, but to heal. And in that closing, she found what she had long sought, serenity, self-respect, and the quiet joy of living life on her own terms.